Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to try and cut through a lot of the noise surrounding U.S. immigration. We're going to look directly at the data, the systems, and of course, the human stories that shape the whole conversation. So let's dive right in. Before we get into any of the charts or the numbers, I want to start right here. This is a quote from the grandson of immigrants from the Philippines, and it really just hits home that behind every single statistic, there's a person, there's a family, and often a story of incredible sacrifice, all for the chance at a better life.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's get a key definition down. What exactly do we mean by immigrant? Well, according to the U.S. government, the official term is a person who is legally admitted for permanent residence. So that's the key term we're going to be working with.
Okay, so keeping that personal story and that official definition in mind, let's get into our first section. We're going to look at the actual process, the long road people take to immigrate legally, and the incredible strains that system is under.
And that brings us to a really crucial question. So, let's say you're a family member of a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. You do everything by the book, you file all the right paperwork. How long do you think you'd have to wait? A few months? Maybe a couple of years? What would you guess?
Well, take a look at this. Now, it's important to say this data is from March 2013, but it shows a problem that's been going on for a long time, the visa backlog. And what's so wild about this is you're not looking at processing times. No, those dates, those are the application dates for people who were just then getting their visas in 2013. So for a sibling of a U.S. citizen from the Philippines, the government was working on applications from all the way back in July of 1989. It's pretty staggering.
Let that sink in for a second. 20+ years. Based on that data, some people were waiting more than 2 full decades to legally join their family. Imagine that. So here's the bottom line. When the legal path is so long that it's measured in decades, not years, and you add in all the economic pressures people might be facing back home, well, you can start to understand why that creates a really powerful incentive for people to look for other ways into the country.
All right, let's pivot a little bit. We've seen how tough the system can be. But now, let's look at the people themselves. Who are the people that make up the U.S. foreign-born population? And how is immigration actually changing the face of the country?
This chart from 2003 shows a really huge demographic shift. Back then, more than half of the entire foreign-born population came from Latin America, with another quarter coming from Asia. This is a complete 180 from a century before that, when the vast majority of immigrants were coming from Europe.
In this chart here, it really drives home the impact. On the left, you've got the foreign-born population, and on the right, the native-born population, again from 2003. See that big bulge in the middle on the left? That shows a much larger chunk of people in their prime working years, say from about 25 to 55. These are the folks often working, paying taxes, and really contributing to the economy.
And looking ahead, the U.S. Census Bureau expects these trends to continue in a big way. This timeline shows their projection that the share of the non-Hispanic white population will go from almost 69% in 2006 all the way down to just over 40% by the year 2100. And a huge driver of that change is immigration.
Okay, so you have this strained legal system and these massive demographic shifts happening. So the big question is, how has the U.S. government responded? Well, our third section is all about the massive effort to secure the country's borders.
Well, one of the most direct things has been a huge investment in people. Just look at this. The number of U.S. Border Patrol agents basically doubled in just 7 years. It went from about 10,700 in 2005 to over 21,000 by 2012. That's a massive increase.
But here's where it gets really interesting. You might think, okay, more agents means more arrests, right? But check this out. The number of border apprehensions, that's when someone is caught crossing illegally, actually peaked way back in the year 2000 at 1.7 million. After that, despite all those new agents, the numbers fell off a cliff, hitting a 40-year low by 2010.
So let's look at who is actually being removed from the country. This data shows a pretty clear shift in strategy. In the 2012 fiscal year, the government removed almost 410,000 non-citizens. And of that group, a clear majority, 55%, were people who would be convicted of crimes. That tells you where the enforcement priorities were headed.
So the big takeaway here is that the response has been coming from all sides. It's not just about more agents at the border. It's also physical stuff, like hundreds of miles of barriers authorized by the Secure Fence Act. It's technology, like the U.S. Visit program that brought in biometric scanning. And it's happening in the workplace, with systems like E-Verify that let employers check someone's legal status.
Okay, for our last section, let's bring all this back down to earth.
We've talked about the system, the demographics, the government's response, but what does all of this actually feel like for people and communities on the ground? What's the lived experience?
Because this isn't just about policy debates. It has very real, very human consequences. These examples here come directly from the U.S. Department of Justice, and they show documented patterns of discrimination. Everything from police misconduct aimed at Latinos and non-English speakers, to voting officials making it harder for certain citizens to vote.
And nowhere are these realities felt more intensely than in the 24 U.S. counties that are right on the border with Mexico. This is a totally unique region, home to 6.7 million people, where all these policies and pressures are just a part of daily life.
And this table, wow, it paints a really powerful picture of just how concentrated the challenges are there. If you took those 24 counties and made them the 51st state, just look where they'd rank. Dead last, 51st in income per person and in the share of people without a high school diploma. 50th for health insurance, second highest for unemployment in the entire country. These are just profound, systemic issues all focused in one region.
So, after looking at all this, where does it leave us? Well, I think it boils down to this one central, incredibly complicated question. How does a nation balance that powerful dream of opportunity, the one we heard about in that very first quote, with the hard realities of a system that is clearly strained, and the very real, very profound impact all of this has on the communities living right at its edge?